Hello everyone, and welcome to this Motor Trade Radio Supplier Special with your hosts Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson.
Hello and welcome from me, Curtis Hutchinson, and Philip Nothard to this Motor Trade Radio Supplier Special podcast. This episode is dedicated to Tracker, the UK's leading stolen vehicle recovery specialist. Together with the police, last year alone, Tracker recovered more than 1,000 stolen vehicles worth over £20 million and typically recovers on average £1.5 million worth of stolen vehicles each month. With over 1 million systems installed to date, its managing director, Mark Rose, joins us to talk about how the business works with car dealers to provide additional revenue streams and value-add products for their customers. So welcome back to the podcast, Mark.
Curtis, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, Mark. I know you've been a guest on the regular show, but we're going to take a little bit more of a deep dive into Tracker today. So welcome to the podcast, and it's an absolute pleasure, as Curtis said, to get you back on.
Brilliant, great stuff. Thanks, Philip. And actually, I should say it was over 1,100 stolen vehicles last year, and we're getting up to about 2 million a month in terms of recovery. So it is very much on the rise.
Rising daily, yes. But we'll get a little bit more into that shortly. And I mean, just for the benefit of the listeners, Mark, I mean, let's start with a quick overview of what Tracker does. You would assume that most people will be aware of Tracker, but they may not be fully aware of some of the detail and what you do get involved with, and the USPs from you and your business.
Okay, thanks, Philip. Tracker's been around for 30 years, so we're hugely experienced in this space. We're very much focused around stolen vehicle recovery. And we have two unique selling points in terms of the way that we deliver our service. Any other service or OEM-based service around stolen vehicle recovery will be provided with the same technology that's in your mobile phone, GPS to tell you where the vehicle is and GSM to transmit that information. At Tracker, we use something called VHF. It's a radio frequency, very high frequency. And it has two super useful properties when combined with stolen vehicle recovery. First of all, it is almost impossible to jam. So any thief worth their salt will have a GPS GSM jam on which will knock out your existing system, but it's almost impossible to jam a VHF signal. And secondly, because of the nature of the frequency, you can see that vehicle, whether it's in an underground car park or indeed a shipping container. Again, with GPS GSM, if you're in a shipping container, that acts as a Faraday cage around the vehicle and won't let the signal out. The second USP that we have is we have a formal agreement with UK policing. That's all 43 forces in England and Wales, Police Scotland and the Police Service of Northern Ireland. And that means they have our tracking equipment, VHF-based tracking equipment, in over 2,000 of their police cars and all the police helicopters. And so if you pull those two things together, if somebody phones up having had their car stolen and it's got one of our devices in, the police know the device isn't going to get jammed, it's not going to get dark because you can see it anywhere, and they've got our kit in their vehicles, so they've got the best opportunity of getting to that quickly and recovering it. And you put all of those elements together, and that means we have a recovery rate above 95%, 80% of which comes back in the first 24 hours undamaged. And all of that is highly relevant because, car theft is currently at a 15-year high, and actually across the board, recovery is down at around 23%. So vehicles much more often than not don't come back.
I mean, fascinating insight there, Mark. And just following on from that point, you mentioned that car theft is at a 15-year high. What else can you share about some of the specific trends that you identified in 2024 and your theft recovery successes there?
So let me just start by saying the reason we see these stats as they are is not as a result of the police not caring. They absolutely do, and they are focused on recovering vehicles. It's much more a factor of the level of criminality that is stealing those vehicles. So car theft is all perpetrated by organised criminal gangs, which means they're much better and much more organised in the way that they steal. But they're also much better at disposing of vehicles as well. And on that basis, it's much more difficult for the police to react without kind of the sort of incremental help that they get from having devices from Tracker within those vehicles. Other trends we see in terms of how vehicles are stolen, well, first of all, it's become increasingly more sophisticated. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, people used to break into people's houses, get hold of the keys, and then drive off with their vehicles, having stolen the keys. More recently, we've had the advent of relay attacks. That effectively means that the thieves have some clever kit which enables them to trick the car keys in the house into thinking they're right next to the car themselves. And so the car effectively opens up based on this relay attack, and they can start the car and drive it off without actually having the keys at all. There's a lot of work that's gone into what's known as CAN compromise, where thieves can actually get direct to the CAN of the car and start it up. One of the trends we've seen, thieves have found a device which can go up under the near side wheel arch attached to the adaptive headlights, and within less than a minute they can start the car, unlock it, disable the alarm, and drive it off. So increasingly there is real sophistication in the way cars are stolen. I think the other thing that we're starting to see, though, is with car manufacturers investing very heavily to try and combat that. We've seen this with Range Rover quite a lot in terms of the amount that they are investing to try and combat relay attack and CAN compromise. The thieves are going back to the old ways of breaking into people's houses, stealing the keys and driving them off based on that. So it's a little bit circular, and perhaps with an unintended consequence of people then having their houses broken into as well. A couple of other things probably just worth mentioning. We also see a real rise in the number of chop shops. So as that criminal enterprise becomes more sophisticated, very often what they'll do is through a series of legitimate websites and channels build up an order book for car parts. They'll then employ a kind of a load of relatively junior criminals who go out and steal these vehicles for maybe £500 a time, and then they'll fulfill that order book through those stolen vehicles. And a way of kind of demonstrating that, back in 21, in conjunction with the police, we closed down 2 chop shops. In 2022 that was 8, 23 that was 44, and last year we closed down 55 chop shops. And they are really quite invidious things, chop shops, because they act as a sinkhole for vehicles in local areas. What we see is, as soon as a chop shop opens up, the level of vehicle theft increases massively in the surrounding area, and conversely, once you close it down, then it drops quite significantly as well. So we're seeing a lot more around that. And then I guess in terms of the types of cars being stolen, then Range Rover is still relatively high on that. Hugely desirable, very valuable vehicles. So the thieves are putting a huge amount of time and effort into finding a way of stealing those. I talked about Lexus. They found a particular device which gets into a number of those. Mercedes and BMW hold strong in the top 5 in terms of overall vehicles that are stolen. But then we see some other ones coming through that you might not expect. We've seen quite a recent burst in Nissan Juke, for example, which has just had a really steep increase over the last few months, as well as cars like the Kia Sportage and the Niro as well. So very often that's linked with a new device coming on the market, which enables thieves to go after that particular vehicle. And very often because there is a volume of those already in the market, which means disposing of parts is a lucrative thing to do.
Well, Mark, you've outlined some sort of worrying trends there, and I think what's really coming across is that the thieves are just getting smarter as the cars get smarter. The thieves are getting smarter as well. Now, I know we'll talk to you about how Tracker is addressing this as a business, but I'm just wondering, with the growing proportion of EVs now on our roads, are there any trends you're identifying specifically around EV thefts? And is it harder or easier for thieves to steal EVs compared to ICE vehicles?
I think the proportion of EVs on the road is still relatively small, and that feeds into a still relatively small proportion of car theft being of electric vehicles. We're starting to see some movement, particularly within those EV brands that are selling at volume. So MG is just starting to creep up. And I guess that's very much as I would expect it, because ultimately, in order to work out how to steal these vehicles, the thieves will very often hire or get hold of vehicles one way or another and reverse engineer those. But in order to put that time and effort in, there needs to be a good return on investment for doing that. And that happens when there is a big population of those vehicles in market. So I think as we see more and more EVs coming into market, then we'll start to see those kind of numbers of thefts increasing accordingly. And similarly, they'll invest more in terms of the channels for disposing of either the vehicles or the parts themselves. I mean, certainly if you look at electric vehicle batteries, there are a number of different uses that you can have for those. So they in themselves are a very valuable commodity. I think in terms of whether they're easier or more difficult to steal, I don't get the impression they're either, particularly, again, when the thieves decide they're going to put a bit of resource behind stealing them, they'll find a way of doing it.
And I think you've just illustrated how resourceful they can be if they're actually renting a specific car and then working out how to steal it. And you're seeing evidence of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, reverse engineering in the same way that you'll have telematics companies who get hold of vehicles to reverse engineer it based on kind of the OBD port, so they can provide the right sort of services for vehicles. These will do exactly the same thing, but the service they're providing is a very different type.
Shady bunch of characters there, Mark. Shady bunch of characters. It is going to, I mean, just on that EV, but it is going to get interesting as EV market grows and the technology, and, you know, we're not there to talk about all the tech and AI and things like this, but it's where the market starts to shift in that black market of value that sits on these vehicles going forward. And I mean, in the earlier question, you talked about, you know, working with the police and obviously the VHF technology, which is intriguing in its own right, that obviously, you know, being able to track that vehicle, even when it's in a container, amongst many of Tracker's USPs. But, you know, you outlined how you're working with the police to aid in recovering even more stolen vehicles and how this benefits, you know, we talked about the dealers and, you know, this is a, you know, this products in terms of Tracker, where that adds value to the dealers. Do you want to talk us through that work and why it should benefit, why the dealers should be listening to what Tracker has to offer?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, working hand in glove with the police is absolutely fundamental to the way that Tracker operates. Unlike many of the other providers in this market, we don't have our own recovery agents. The police recover everything that we recover on that basis. So it really is a hugely important relationship that we have with the police, but it's also hugely valuable because obviously there's a huge organisation, so there's real scale to what they can do. But also very often when recovering vehicles, especially if they're in chop shops or they might be in other quite dangerous locations, having the police as the people who are the first out there to recover those vehicles means that they can, go into those sites and also arrest the criminals who are stealing the vehicles. I mean, last year, I think I mentioned we closed down 55 chop shops. In the process of doing that, the police made 144 arrests, and many of those have gone on to kind of receive criminal convictions. So it's not just around recovering the vehicles, it's actually starting to hit the criminal gangs and the infrastructure that they have, which ultimately can only be a good thing. And there's kind of a ripple effect that comes with that. So, we have one of our vehicles stolen, the police recover it, that leads to a chop shop that's found. That means that there will be another 8 or 9 collateral cars within that chop shop that will get recovered at the same time. And then that also means that there are probably, 250 fewer cars that are stolen over the following 2 months in that area as that chop shop closes down. So you can sort of see those ripples going out in terms of what we're doing, which is hugely beneficial and really as a direct result of the close working relationship we have with the police. In terms of the dealers themselves, I mean, the dealers, as your audience will know far better than I, are facing some pretty considerable headwinds at the moment. You've got the ongoing high court case around finance, which obviously is being challenged again, but that is suggesting that the ability to make money from finance is going to reduce. Really tight regulation around GAP means that a lot of dealers are pulling out of that space. So a lot of them are finding or looking for ways of replacing revenues that they would have had otherwise. I won't get into all the kind of other problems that the ZEV mandate and various other things have caused. That could mean that we're here for
quite a bit longer, yes,
the rest of the day. But I guess by working with Tracker, what dealers are doing is providing a service which is genuinely needed. Theft is up, recovery down, insurance premiums are on the rise. In fact, if you have your car stolen and you don't get it back, then the chances are when you come to insure your next car, your premiums will double. So I think the dealers, when working with us, have a confidence that they know that the service that they're going to offer to their customers is one that's required, is one where there is good margin in it for them. And also it's not regulated by the FCA as well, which also makes the whole thing simpler too. So it starts to really become a very viable product for them to sell and to generate incremental revenue through.
Yeah, and I know because we speak on a regular basis, and as you say, there's a few elements with this. One is, as you said earlier, that working with the police, it has a ripple effect, a larger impact when you do get the chop shops or you get the criminal gangs, and it's not just about that getting that one single car back. It's the knock-on effect into other areas. But as you say there, the long term is getting that insurance premium down, which will help the retailers to sell cars, because that's key. If the insurance premium is lower on some of these vehicles, then that is an easier sell to the customers. But more importantly, to your point there at the end, it's that potential add-on value. It's where there is an additional stream of revenue through a non-FCA regulated product that, as you said earlier, the gap sales and discretionary commission and things like this, is all taking little bits away from those revenue channels for the retailers. and this gives them that extra revenue stream. And I know you are speaking with retail groups at the minute, and who are actually realising the opportunities available to them, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. I think we've got a few examples. So we've been working with Farhad at V12, got a group of 4 big car supermarkets. They launched with us at the tail end of last year. Why did they choose us? Actually, they replaced an existing aftermarket product that they had, but they decided to go with Tracker because it was more profitable for them, but also they kind of saw it as better value for their customers. It was meeting a genuine need that a lot of their customers were asking them about. They have been extraordinarily successful. So at the moment, they've got an attach rate of over 30%, which is fantastic. So they're really doing incredibly well. On the back of that, what's been successful, the way they have implemented that has been extraordinary. It's gone across all levels of the organisation. We've done a really significant amount of face-to-face training with them. They've got the right sort of incentives, targets for the salespeople to really get them excited about what we're doing. And they've hit 30%. They're now looking at getting a 50% penetration is the next goal in their sights. So that has been a fantastic success for them. On the sort of bigger dealer group side, we are working with listers at the moment. They're rolling out Tracker across all 50 of their dealerships. Again, they've got real buy-in across the group. Good interactive training program with all of the dealerships. They've made a strong start, which again is particularly good in kind of that aftermarket space. Hendy is another one. Interestingly, Hendy have got a real focus around light commercial vehicles. We're working with the brand director there, David Graham. And of course, if you get your van stolen and you're a sole trader or a small to medium-sized enterprise, then that has a really material impact on your ability to make money, because that van very often will have all of the tools of the trade that you're in, without which you can't actually go and carry out your business. And I think that's one of the reasons that Hendy is really focused in on that LCV segment, because ensuring those vehicles come back quickly makes a massive difference for them. And then it's probably also just worth mentioning the car manufacturers that we work with as well. So we are kind of the official technology partner of BMW, Mini, Rolls-Royce. We've actually got a fully integrated application that we've developed for them, and that's a pan-European project. We are the official aftermarket supplier of stolen vehicle recovery for Mercedes. We talked about JLR. We're the only SVR provider that is approved by JLR, really because the device we have, or we're using for them, is a battery-powered device. So it's self-powered, it's totally non-parasitic. It's got a battery life of 5 years, but it doesn't interfere with any of their electrics. And also on that basis, absolutely doesn't interfere with their warranty either. And then I guess the big one that we're doing at the moment is with Toyota. So we've been working with TGB since July last year, and aware that they've had an issue, particularly around their Lexus brands and with Hilux to a degree. They've taken this really enlightened approach where they're doing everything they can in terms of engineering the vehicles themselves, but they've put 36,000 of our trackers in vehicles over a really short period of time, and we're seeing some great results on that. There was a story this morning, actually. A father and son in Leicester had matching Lexus RXs. They were both stolen from the driveway this morning at 9:02 a.m. Both had tracker fitted under the TGB program in December, and both were found by different police units within an hour. So they're absolutely delighted, and that's why TGB is sort of investing heavily in order to get these devices into their vehicles, because they're hugely keen to ensure that their customers are not affected by the ever increasing levels of car theft that we're seeing across the country. So it's been great working with those guys, and as I say, I think it's a really enlightened approach. The next kind of step of the plan with them is moving from a program which is funded by TGB centrally to one which we can roll out across all of their dealers, where the dealers start to make some good money on the back of that as well.
I mean, clearly a lot going on there within Tracker, and obviously, clearly some of that is adding the benefits and what is happening there. So we'll be back after this short break from Mark and more information on Tracker shortly.
You're listening to a Motor Trade Radio Supplier Special.
Well, welcome back to this Tracker Supplier Special with Mark Rose. Mark, over the years, Tracker has built many partnerships with both insurers and brokers. And I know you've spoken about insurers already, but I'm just wondering how you think these partnerships are helping dealers.
Yeah, we've worked with a number of insurers, and actually an increasing number of insurers. We have a team dedicated within Tracker to working across that sector. What we're seeing with the insurers is they're increasingly starting to rate based on the type of tracker which is in a vehicle, as opposed to whether it might be a Thatcham Category 5 or a Thatcham Category 7 tracker that's in there. So Thatcham has these ratings based on the type, where Category 5 is the kind of the highest category, and counterintuitively 7 is the lower one. But what you might well have is an OEM system where they put a tracker into the vehicle at point of manufacture, which is just GPS and GSM based, which meets all of the specifications to be a Thatcham Cat 5 tracker, so that highest category of tracker, which often insurers previously have been saying you have to have that Cat 5 certificate. But if you look at the actual recovery of those, because it's only based on GPS, GSM, it's easy to jam. And because it goes in the factory, it always goes in exactly the same place. So the thieves know exactly where to find it, and therefore it's easily removed. And for those sort of systems, we're seeing recovery rates of maybe between 30 and 35%. So even though they're technically the highest Thatcham category in terms of the specification of the device that's in them, the results are very poor. Whereas you would have an aftermarket S11 based device from Tracker, and we've got recovery well over 90% of those. And again, I think for insurers, it's the speed of recovery which is absolutely fundamental, which comes back to our relationship with the police. I think I mentioned 80% of everything we recover is within 24 hours. Actually, 50% comes back within 4 hours. All of that is undamaged. And very often, I think the average distance from theft to where the recovery is about 6 kilometres. So these vehicles don't travel terribly far.
That in itself is quite surprising. I mean, I'm surprised it's that close.
Well, I guess the standard MO for thieves is they will steal a car. They'll very often then go and leave it somewhere, what they call to soak, which is they leave it for a day to see if it's going to get picked up.
Right.
Very often they'll have the jammer in the vehicle, but to see if it's going to get picked up anyway. Yeah. If it's not, they'll then feel confident to take it on to either a chop shop or stick it into a shipping container where it'll get whisked abroad very quickly. And also, and unless it's going to a chop shop, but for a lot of the vehicles, they take very good care of them because they're expensive commodities that they're looking after, and they want to ensure that they're in good shape to then sell on. So if you get them quickly, then, as I say, they tend to come back undamaged. From a dealer perspective as well, that if an insurance company is going to require a tracker to be fitted to a particular type of vehicle, and very often that is the case, it kind of makes sense for the dealer to do that themselves and generate the incremental revenue and profit from it, as opposed to that vehicle just driving off their forecourt and then the end customer going to a third party. So that's just money driving out of the front door, which is unnecessary. And I think the other thing is, as I say, insurance companies are working more closely with us because they know the stuff's coming back undamaged. So we're able very often to bring better rates to dealer customers for insurance, particularly on some of the more expensive and more difficult to insure vehicles. So again, that's something which is a real benefit to the end customers and something that dealers can bring to their customers. And then I think maybe one final thing on that as well is we've got some really interesting work we're doing with one of the brokers at the moment, where we're effectively looking at putting together a tracker branded price comparison website, which will be based upon vehicles that have our trackers in them, and we'll have a panel of insurers sitting behind that price comparison website who understand the value that we bring, and therefore, as and when you buy your vehicle, if you go onto that website, you will get the very best quote based on the type of equipment that we've put into that vehicle. So we're not quite there yet. Working with insurers is always a kind of a lengthy business, but that's something that's coming up fairly shortly, hopefully.
Oh, that really does sound like a great initiative, and really following on from that, Mark. What can you tell us that's new for Tracker over the next 12 to 18 months, and can you share any other innovations that you're currently working on?
We've got a few things that we're working on at the moment. I think one of the really interesting ones is all based around data. So we have access to a whole series of data sets as a result of the number of devices that we have in market, the sort of relationship we have with the police, and with a whole series of car manufacturers in terms of getting hold of data from them. And what we're doing is we're in the process of putting together a large language model, so using artificial intelligence to run across this data, whether that's theft data, what's being stolen, what's happening to the vehicles once they're stolen. We get jamming alert data from devices that we have in vehicles. We obviously have all the recovery data as well. And the aim of that is effectively, at the point a car is stolen, by putting all of that information together and running that through the model, we should start to be able to predict where that car will end up. So effectively, we can shortcut the recovery process and say if the car's been stolen in this location at this time of day, we'd expect it to turn up in one of these 2 or 3 locations within this period of time, which just massively simplifies and accelerates the whole recovery process. So again, stuff that we're working on currently, but I think that could be hugely interesting to see how that develops.
I mean, it's going to be fascinating when some of that, as you say, efficiency and speeding up that recovery and as you say, working much closer with the police and the insurance companies and brokers, and fascinating to hear about that relationship in terms of with that broker and that website and linking in with insurers around, bringing that more efficient and cost effective insurance opportunities on vehicles that have got tracker. It is great. I think both Curtis and I have certainly learned something around the old chop shops and the that dark world of vehicle theft on this chat, Mark. But fascinating insight. And I can't wait to see some of this data when it becomes available. So, I mean, all I can say is huge thank you for chatting and talking to us through some of the activities, the initiatives that Tracker are up to, and more importantly, how that can help the dealer sector, around that insurance, around their customer relationships and their vehicles. So fascinating insight on how Tracker is addressing many of the issues in the theft of vehicles in the dealer sector. And if any of our listeners, more importantly, want to find out a little bit more about Tracker and how it can help their businesses, what's the best way to get in touch with you and the team at Tracker?
Obviously I'm on LinkedIn, so if you just put Mark Rose Tracker into Google, that'll take you to my LinkedIn page relatively quickly, or alternatively just drop me a mail. It's very simple, mark.rose@tracker.co.uk.
Well, Mark, many thanks for joining us, and fascinating insight there into the work of Tracker. And many thanks to you for listening to this very special Motor Trade Radio Supplier Special with Tracker.
Thank you for listening to this Motor Trade Radio Supplier Special, presented by Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson.